Dune Awakening is dead. At least that's what people are saying. And well, if you look at the Steam DB charts, then it's definitely not exactly going great. Having a peak of less than 10k from a peak of all time of 190 players does not seem exactly great. In fact, that is below 6% retention, which is not the best thing ever for a game typically. But then again, it's also not the worst thing. I think Dune Awakening is a very peculiar position and always has been because it's a great game that suffered from well, let's just call it lackluster response from the developers when addressing the problems with it, because you inserted PvP in a game that's fundamentally kind of not about PvP to a degree, which ticked off a lot of people. But now, Dune is gonna be getting DLC at the end of 2026 or around 2026. And a huge thing happened. Chapter 3. New endgame, a lot of new things are happening. So, can Dune make a comeback? I honestly think it can. It was a fun game. It was a big game, and as you can see, the drop off happened, but man, the drop off took a long while. Okay, it took 2 months. It took 2 months to lose 2/3 of their users, which is actually quite a lot. Typically, bad games die faster than this, but Dune Awakening managed to hold on. And now, obviously, people are talking that Dune is dead. Let's see if that's really true.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is what's left of Dune Awakening. A bunch of abandoned bases slowly being consumed by the desert. And the bases being shown off on screen right now were bases for massive guilds, which one poor guild member obviously was left behind refueling the generators for these bad boys every 20 or so days, and paying the taxes for them too. But now it seems even the most active guilds, at least on my server that I've been playing on, have mostly given up and given their bases back over to the desert from whence they came. And there shouldn't be any surprise for anyone that's read the news recently, as Dune Awakening's player count has dropped below Funcom's other main title, Conan Exiles, which is
That is insane though that it drops below Conan Exiles. Conan Exiles is like ancient at this point.
Absolutely wild given how popular Dune Awakening was just a few months ago. This game was absolutely everywhere. I mean, it sucked me in too. I've dumped in, I don't even know how many hours to be exact, I've lost to this game. But like many others, I too have just stopped playing because, well, why did I stop playing? Why has everyone stopped playing? I'm going to share my thoughts with you guys here about why I, as someone that was most definitely caught up in the craze for Dune Awakening, why I stopped playing and why I think so many others did as well. By the way, the incredible gameplay you're watching right now is all I really log into Dune Awakening to do, and that simply is to refuel my generators and go pay my taxes. That's the only thing I get on the game to do now. Besides that, I might get on to, well, farm the fuel cells for my generators, or go farm some Solari to go pay my taxes. Other than that, that's all I ever do now, which is really boring. And the reason I have to do that is one of the first reasons I could think of as to why some players just gave up on this game. And that is, up until very recently, from the get-go on this game, you've always had to come back in every single month and check on your base, refuel the generators, and pay your taxes. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound too bad. If you're playing a game fairly regularly, that shouldn't really be too much of a problem.
It actually is bad. There have been over time a lot of games that has this style of thing, and it always collapses. It always collapses because it's just a chore. At the end of the day, it's just a chore. And it's meant to keep you logged in and running the hamster wheel eternally. And I honestly think that's a massive detriment because the moment people understand that you're taking advantage, that someone is thinking that you're an idiot who can't figure this stuff out, it's over. People are gonna start resenting your game, and this is one of the things. These taxes, these, oh, keep you logged in, okay? Listen, log in daily rewards are one thing, because we all know that they're supposed to, they're literally made like that. But these tax systems, they're just literally made so, you're forced to log in, otherwise you know that bad things are gonna happen. It's the worst style of system. And every time people recognize these bad types of system, people just leave. People notice it and they're like, oh wow, they think I'm a dummy. I'm out. And that's how it goes. It always goes like that.
And it's really not. It really was not a problem when I was putting in most of the 200 or so hours I have dumped into this game at this moment. Because, duh, you're playing constantly, you're going to have no problem keeping your base up and supplied. But the problem that comes with that is that, well, you can't really take a break now, can you? You always have to hop on at least once every 20 days, or I guess once a month if you power your base with the spice wind generator. I guess that'll work, right? So at least once a month you have to hop on and either farm the fuel cells or farm the lubricant that you need to keep those wind turbines up, which doesn't really sound like much of a big deal, but the fact remains is that you can't take a break. There's just no way to step back, take a breath. Maybe you lose everything in the deep desert. You're out there running with your crew. You got a hauler full of spice. You're coming back in. You got jumped by some other guild, and you lose everything. That is, of course, incredibly frustrating, and you want to take a break from the game. Well, you can't. You always got to keep coming back to it. So that kind of pushes you, of course, to play more and play more often. And I think that led to some players getting burnt out. And then, if they did decide to take a break and forgot to have someone refuel their generators or pay their taxes, guess what? Everything's gone. And I know, yes, recently, very, very recently, they have pushed an update through where, yes, you can back up your entire base, vehicles and everything. You just got to take them apart, toss them in some storage containers, and you can back up your base and everything. But they did this now way after they've lost all their players. Simply too little too late, which is my second point. Funcom was ever so slow in many a case to respond to some of the player feedback and some of the, grievances players had with the game. In particular, of course, player versus player content and combat and balances there. It wasn't until quite some months ago that they finally adjusted the spotting range for the ornithopters in the deep desert. And we'll get to the combat here in a moment, but bugs and issues that just made it downright miserable in some cases to play the game and do the end game loop just took forever to get fixed. I think now finally you can take your spice hauler back through the world map without worrying about it disappearing or your spice disappearing. I think that's finally patched. I can't say for certain because we haven't tried it because
yeah, the issues that have stayed they have been pretty bad, needless to say. So, all of this, legit, sadly.
Most of my friend group, we're not really playing this as our main game anymore, but that was something that should have been there all along. If you didn't know, you're supposed to be able to fly your carrier out with your crawler full of spice or empty of spice and go between the deep desert and Haga Basin. So, ideally, you have your main base in Haga Basin, you bring your carrier back with a crawler full of spice, you plop it down, transfer the spice over to your containers, and get that spice processing. But no, in order to get your spice back, and in all the videos...
It's actually quite sad, by the way, because if you think about it, this game started off so cool. Massive sand world, whoa! Getting certain gear took getting the gear until the deep desert was, 20 hours for the average player? Which was pretty long, to be honest. Well, actually, flat out, it was long, not pretty long. It was long. There were so many good things about this, but the response of the developers was just not there. It really feels like if the developers were more active, then Dune would have not gotten to this decrepit state. I wonder if it's actually bots currently playing Dune. I really do. Dune Awakening. Uh, buy items on the line. Let's see if there's actually any good things. There's sponsored by Dune Awakening shit. I have no idea what this is. Dune Awakening Solar. Okay, 50 million costs 8 euros. Okay. Um, this is a bad shop. I can't actually tell how good it is. Let's. I'm gonna share this. Oh, here's our favorite shop. Here's our favorite shop, boys. It is what it is. Okay, Jesus Christ. Yeah, this is probably botted. Oh man, if you see no one and this is the state of your look at this. Look at this. Dune Awakening items. Bam. $10, 15, 16, 20, and 183. Platinum Scout blah blah ornithopter. That is Mark 6. That is insane. That is the highest, right? Oh no, there's one. There's even a better one for 2 hundos. Oh wow. Jesus Christ, look at this. Bro, man, again, botting games seems so profitable, I'm not gonna lie. Let's look at weapons. $10, $20, $22, 50, $56 a tier 6 item. Holy, this is ridiculous. Wow. Materials. Let's look at materials. So 100 copper, 100. Okay, everything's like 100. Okay, you can also buy 10. Is this the same? Is this the same pricing? They have the rarer stuff per 10. Water, 2 liters. Jesus, fuel cells. Man, this is impressive. Oh, look at this. Kitten plates. 50 buckaroonies. Holy. Refined spice. $5. Wow. This is insane. Garments. Oh, this is just fashionscaping. Can we actually see something expensive now? Oh, no. You got the tier 5 stuff. So that was not the tier 6. No, this was the tier 6. What the hell? So, tier 6 costs less than tier 5? I'm missing something probably. Because it's unique, I guess. Currencies. Let's see the currencies. Oh, spice. Damn. Dude. This is impressive. Base building services. Wow. 300. What is this? What do we get? Base size. Sanctuary. Recommended for a number of players 10. Number of expansions 5. Vehicle expansion, vehicle storage, large ornithopter, helipad, ornithopter, helipad, large ground vehicle garage, 4 ground car vehicles. Sandcrawler garage, facility storage, tier 1, 6 facilities, powered, blah blah blah. Wow! And this costs $300, eh? And I don't see the actual difference here. Oh, essentially, a style base. Okay, Atreides, and the other one is Carhonen. Okay. Carhonen, Jesus Christ, it's been a long time since I have talked about Dune, huh? Yeah. Okay. Wow, this is insane. Tools. The tools are they're not sub-expensive or tools. Dew site. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean I'm assuming it's just bots at this point or something like that. People who just like to go in and kind of gamble in the deep desert and see what happens. Maybe. I'm not sure. It is wild. This is wild stuff.
That you've watched where we've farmed spice in the deep desert, you have to take the spice out of the crawler, throw it into a storage container, or throw it into a bunch of medium ornithopters and fly back and forth between Haga Basin and the deep desert carrying, only so much spice at a time. And keep in mind, it wasn't that long ago that they did bump up the storage space available to you in the medium thopters. So you're making multiple runs back and forth with a full crew of people. You're wasting, hours transferring spice between Haga Basin and the deep desert if you don't have enough resources to build, your refinery out in the deep desert, which sure you could, but I mean, not every clan had those resources, right? I mean, we're not one of them. So we had to, bring it back and forth between Haga Basin and the desert. And that just took forever. And of course, that just kills, the gameplay loop. So it was infuriating that it took them so long to finally get that fixed. And again, now it might work. And of course, you have.
Yeah, again, the story of this game is it had massive potential, but the updates were just not fucking there, which is a shame.
The storage container now that you can take back and forth.
But again, I do think that there is a comeback potential because people played it, people liked it for a reasonable amount of time. So I think there is. I think there is potential and a comeback. But the devs need to, actually like fucking update this shit.
Now, so that's pretty good. But, again, a little late for that now, isn't it, Funcom, right? So that was a main issue too. And of course, now too, that most of the players have moved on from the Haga Basic content. They start releasing, more story DLC and stuff. They just released Chapter 3 a couple of days ago for the free DLC, and they did release Chapter 2 a little while ago. But that's the third point with Dune Awakening. This game had because the game's still running. It seems like it has an identity crisis. I don't know if Funcom really thought through what they wanted to do with Dune Awakening. Because the first, 80, 70, 60 hours of game, depending upon how fast you blitz through all the Haga Basin PvE storyline content, it's great. It's amazing. It sucked me in, like you guys saw.
Yeah, the crazy thing about Dune in kind of general is it honestly feels like a single player game that kind of is just tacked on to be multiplayer, and that's kind of it. That's kind of where we are, which is strange to say the least. So the idea was a game that's gonna make recurring revenue over time and stuff, but at the end they kind of just made a single player game that more or less people wanted to be a single player game, and then they kind of made it into a multiplayer game with PvP that no one asked for, and it was a bad move, and that kind of ruined it.
So deep into the world, the lore, the story. It was an amazing 60 hours in Haga Basin, playing through the story, doing all the quests and such. And then, of course, after you do this, you have this great PvE experience and all this jazz. This great solo player, single player PvE experience, which is, again, easily one of the best that I've had in the past few years. Then you get pushed to go into the deep desert and do PvP things, where, like I said, there hasn't really been too much of an update in terms of, deep desert content, and there really hasn't been any expansion to it, besides, of course, balancing changes and, a thing here or there. There's not really been anything else added to the deep desert. So it seems kind of, odd to go from the Endgame back to Haga Basin and play that content again when, you're farming in the deep desert for higher tier loot and stuff. And yeah, you can go play the story DLC and stuff, but you're kind of, an unstoppable god because you've been playing the deep desert content. So that seems kind of weird. I mean, it is free content, don't get me wrong, but, most players have moved on past that and probably won't go back to that afterwards. And then, of course, too, finally, we just have the in-game content just isn't really all that great. I mean, you farming spice and stuff and running your carrier and your crawler.
Yeah, it's a shame because there was so much potential. And honestly, if you remember the back when this game was not when it was not released, when the devs, the lead dev, the CEO of the company that released this game was talking about it, he actually cared. He actually liked Dune, and you could tell that he actually cares about Dune. So he wanted to make a good thing. And, well, they did make a good thing. But it was sadly a single player experience covered up in multiplayer stuff. And, well, that's kind of it. That's what people wanted from Dune, honestly, more than anything else.
It is a lot of fun, but like when it comes to actually dealing with other players in the deep desert, the combat was just so janky. I mean, like ornithopter fights. All it was who can
Yes.
spam the most amount of missiles the fastest, who can land more missiles on the other guy's thopter. The way the missiles work is pretty janky. The combat wasn't really all that intuitive or in depth. You're just spamming Q a bunch of times to get your rockets out. And I mean, they get the lock on shoulder fired missile launcher and stuff. And yeah, sure, that's cool and all, but like that's really it. And then, yeah, sure, you get on the ground, you can do some, you know, PvP hand to hand combat, or obviously with the dart guns. It was just so janky. They didn't really do much to improve it, at least from what we saw from playing the game. In my 200 hours, by the way, in the PvP zone, we only had like one hand to hand fight. In my experience, in most cases, like if your Thopter gets shot down and you're forced to pocket it, the other guy just rolls up with their Thopter and just annihilates you with their rockets, right? So usually wasn't too much actual.
Yeah, not that interesting. And you know what the thing about the deep desert is? As far as I understand this, it was salvageable. You just needed to make it so that, Topters are in the beginning and the end there. Because yes, without a Topter you were just sitting, you were dead. Simple, really. Nothing else. Nothing more, nothing less. They should have made it so there is an actual counterplay to that, but they didn't. Again, great start. Sadly, well, not even a remotely good execution. Anyway, that was Sea Lord Mount Button, 10 out of 10. Bye.